Greetings to all students. Today we are going to discuss an important topic, and that is concept of audit, role of Comptroller and Auditor General. Today's discussion can be divided under following headings: Introduction, concept of audit, Comptroller and Auditor General, appointment and service conditions, duties and powers of the Comptroller and Auditor General, independence of the post, evaluation, and finally conclusion. In the Indian parliamentary democracy, audit is an important instrument of legislative control over the financial functions of the executive. An independent officer is appointed by the legislature to scrutinize the financial practices of the executive and ensure that taxpayers' money is being utilized properly. This officer is called the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. It is an important constitutional post, and the main responsibility of this post is to audit the expenditure and receipts of both the central and state governments of India. Thus, this officer plays an important role in controlling the financial system of the union and the states. Students, our country India is a democratic country and welfare country. In such country, not only this is important that government utilizes more and more public money for the development of the country, but also it is important that there is a mechanism through which the legislature can establish its control over the financial functions of the executive. Accounts and audit are such instruments. In absence of these instruments, you can imagine that there is no guarantee that there will be no irregular, unauthorized and illegal transaction will be in the public accounts system. In India, the Comptroller and Auditor General performs important functions of audit not only for the central government, but also for the state governments. So, it is important to discuss the role and powers of this officer in India. Concept of audit. Audit is one of the most important instruments of parliamentary control over the finances of the country. It is a means of enforcing accountability and is a part of the external control over administration maintained by the legislature. Audit, in simple words, means the examination of accounts with view to determine their correctness. According to James C. Charlesworth, audit means the process of ascertaining whether the administration has spent or is spending its funds in accordance with the terms of the legislative instrument which appropriated the money. Student, meaning of audit in simple words is examination of accounts with view to determine their correctness. It is the process in which the accounts are examined with the view that there is no irregular, illegal or unauthorized transaction takes place. Montgomery has defined audit as a systematic examination of the books and records of a business or other organization in order to ascertain or verify and to report upon the facts regarding its financial operation and the result thereof. Thus, audit is an examination and verification of the accounts after transactions are completed in order to discover and report to the legislative body any unauthorized, illegal or irregular expenditures, any financial practices that are unsound, and whether the administration has faithfully discharged its responsibility. Students, audit is an instrument which verifies that administration has taken all the decisions regarding expenditure and also in receipts, and through the audit the legislature body can know that whether administration has performed its duties regarding financial transactions legally or authorized way. Formerly, audit was conducted only in case of expenditure, and that only to assure that money had been spent in accordance with the appropriation grants but at present it is conducted for all financial transactions, whether for receipt or payment, to ensure that money which has been collected and expended is in accordance with the provisions passed by the legislature. The main objectives of government audit are to ensure that there is provision of funds for the expenditure duly authorized by competent authority, that the expenditure is in accordance with a sanction properly accorded and is incurred by an officer competent to incur it, that payment has been made to the proper person. In case of audit of receipts, some due are regularly recovered and checked against demand, and sums received are duly brought to credit in accounts. The present audit goes a step further by the examination of the faithfulness, wisdom and economy applied by the official in making the expenditure. Students, the audit procedure was formally associated with the expenditure only, but now the audit of transactions related to receipts are also carried out, and in procedure of audit some questions are raised against whether the sum was available for that purpose, was it allotted by competent authority, was that expenditure made in correct functions, and a step further it is also examined today that whether the expenditure or receipt was faithfulness or it was associated with wisdom and economy also. Comptroller and Auditor General. In India, the post of Comptroller and Auditor General has been established by the Constitution to establish parliamentary accountability and expert administrative control over expenditure in financial administration through accounts and audit of accounts of both the Union and the states. Article 148 of the Constitution of India provides for an independent office of the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, while describing the post of Comptroller and Auditor General (CAG), had said that the CAG shall be the most important officer under the Constitution of India. The Comptroller and Auditor General is the head of the Indian Audit and Account Department, who introduces the accurate and uniform government accounts and carries out the responsibility of conducting independent audit. Students, to carry out the activities of audit of government accounts, there is one officer named the Comptroller and Auditor General, who has mentioned in the Constitution of India. This office is mentioned as the most important office by the B.R. Ambedkar, who said that this office will be the most important officer and who will present the accurate and uniform government accounts and will also carry out the important function of audit. In India, accounting and auditing work has been under a separate department which is called the Indian Audit Department. Its chief officer is the Comptroller and Auditor General. As an independent body, this department was established by the Act of 1990. Under the Government of India Act 1935, the post and level of the Auditor General was increased and he was appointed by the Emperor. In the Constitution of 1950, the name of this post was changed to Comptroller and Auditor General and he was made a constitutional officer like the judges of the Supreme Court. Student, if we see the position of this post of the Comptroller and Auditor, we see that in 1919 through the Government of India Act, the separate department of accounts was established. In 1935, the powers of and position of this Comptroller and Auditor General was enhanced, and after independence in Indian Constitution, this officer, the name of this office was changed to the Comptroller and Auditor General and it was given a position of judges of Supreme Court. In 1953, the Indian Parliament passed an act regarding determining the tenure and conditions of service of this officer. In 1971, Parliament passed another act and defined its duties and rights. After 1976, it has been freed from accounting related responsibilities Now, the work of the Comptroller and Auditor General has remained only that of audit. In 1984, by amending the Comptroller and Auditor General Act 1971, the person working on the post has been given the benefit of increase in pension facilities and his power have been increased. So, student, we see right from independence in a gradual manner the position and powers of this post has been increased, and especially in 1976 now the work of Comptroller and Auditor General is associated with only the audit functions and it has been freed from the accounting functions. Appointment and conditions of service. Under the provisions of the Article 148 of the Constitution, the CAG is appointed by the President by warrant under his hand and seal. He is appointed for a period of 6 years or up to the age of 65 years, whichever is earlier. His removal process from the office is similar to the judge of the Supreme Court. His salary is charged on the Consolidated Fund of India. The appointee to the post of CAG has to take an oath before the President or any other person appointed by him. Student, if we see the provisions related to his appointments and conditions of service, we see that this officer is appointed by the President and he is appointed for a period of 6 years or up to the age of 65. For example, if a person is appointed on this post or at the age of 58, he will serve for 6 years, but if he is appointed at this post at the age of 64, he will work for 1 year on this post, and the CAG has to take the oath before the President. According to provisions, the Comptroller and Auditor General would not be eligible for further appointment to any office under the Government of India or under the government of any state after his retirement from the office of the CAG. His salary, allowances and other service conditions are decided by the Parliament, but once appointed, no change is possible against his interest regarding his salary, leave, pension and age limit during his tenure. He is appointed by the President, but remains answerable to the Parliament for his work. Thus, the Auditor General has been kept completely independent beyond the scope of executive authority. Student, to make this officer free from any pressure from the executive part, lots of provisions have been made. For example, he cannot join any office of profit after retirement from this post. His allowances and all service conditions are decided by the Parliament and he remains answerable to the Parliament. No minister is answerable or accountable for his functions. Duties and powers of CAG. The duties and powers of the Comptroller and Auditor General are described in Article 149 and 150 of the Constitution. This officer performs two types of important tasks. First, as a controller, to ensure that all the money is withdrawn from the Consolidated Fund of India as per the permission of the legislature. Second, as the Auditor General, to see that all government money is being spent in accordance with the parliamentary approval and as per the prescribed rules. Students, as the name suggests, Comptroller and Auditor General. When we say Comptroller, his duty becomes to examine that all the funds are withdrawn from the Consolidated Fund of India according to norms, and as Accountant General he has to examine whether all the expenditure have been made with accordance the rules or provisions approved by the Parliament. His duties as Auditor General are as follows. First, he audits the accounts of all expenditure from the Consolidated Fund of the Government of India, all state governments and union territories. Student, he audits all the transactions which are related to the expenditure and receipts and the withdrawal of money from the Consolidated Fund of India and all the state governments and even union territories. Second, while auditing all government expenditure, he ensures that all the money spent was legally available for the same services and purposes. Third, he ensures that the money spent has already been properly approved and is spent by the competent authority. Students, he also examines whether the money allotted to a particular function was available for that with approval of the parliament, and second, money has been properly approved and spent by the competent authority or not. Fourth, he examines whether there was justification for the expenditure of money or not, and whether economy was kept in mind in the expenditure of money or not. Students, while examining the expenditure of money, he goes one step further and examines whether the money was spent with keeping in view the economy. Fifth, he audits all the transactions of the center and the state related to loans, deposits and other funds, etc. Sixth, he examines the transactions and balance sheets related to business and construction activities of the central and state governments to find out the financial propriety. Seventh, on the request of the central or state governments, he also examines the income of any government department. Students, he not only examines the withdrawal of fund from the consolidated fund, but he examines and audits all the transactions of the central and state governments which are related to loans, deposits and all other funds. He examines the transactions and balance sheets related to all the activities of the construction activities, and if the central or state government requests to this office, then he can examine the income of any government department also. Eighth, he examines the accounts of the stores of goods and materials of any government department on the request of the central or state government. Ninth, on the request of the government, he also performs the duty of audit of local institutions. Tenth, he advises the president with regard to prescription of the form in which the accounts of the center and the state shall be kept. Students, we see that he can audit the government stores regarding the goods and material, and if the government request to it, he can audit the accounts of the local institutions also. He advises the president that how the accounts should be prepared and how should they, in which manner they should be kept by the all the institutions. 11th, he submits reports relating to the accounts of the center to the president, who presents them before both the houses of parliament, article 151. And 12th, he submits his audit reports relating to the accounts of a state to the governor, who presents them before the state legislature, article 151. Student, we see that the audit reports are prepared by the Comptroller and Auditor General for both the central government and state governments. The report prepared for the central government is presented before the both houses of the legislature through the president, and the reports which is prepared for the states are presented before the state legislature through the governor of that state. It is noteworthy that to assist in its work, there is a chief accountant general under it in every state. Also, the chief accountant general of the central revenue department and post and telegraph department, the principal audit chairman who examines the expenditure of various railways, the principal audit chairman who examines the expenditure of defense services help in its functions. Student, we see that there is a number of officials who help in the Comptroller and Auditor General in performing its functions. He is also assisted by the principal auditor who examines the accounts of food, rehabilitation and supplies. He gets support from the director of audit who examines the accounts of the government's commercial institutions and companies, and the director of audit who examines the accounts of the Indian government in London and Washington for the audit of the expenditure incurred by the government of India in England and United States of America. Students, we see that the functions of the Comptroller and Auditor General are not limited to the expenditure made in India, but also abroad. In the government of India, expenditure which is made in the Britain and in United States of America also come under the purview of this officer. Powers. The Comptroller and Auditor General and its office have the following powers in relation to accounts and audit: to inspect an office or organization for audit, asking for any accounts, books, diaries, bill records and other documents for audit, obtaining the information needed to prepare accounting reports. The Office of Comptroller and Auditor General is a body with statutory powers to determine the nature, scope and form of audit. Students, here we have powers which have been provided to this office, because without these powers this office cannot perform its duties. So, the Comptroller and Auditor General can seek the documents, all bill records, all other documents which are required to prepare the accounting and to prepare the audit reports. Many financial irregularities are brought to light by the Comptroller and Auditor General in its reports. Cases of unwise expenditure and excessive expenditure are also brought to the fore. In his report, he raises many important questions and gives suggestions related to improvement in working methods, changes in organization and rules. It is noteworthy that after 1976, this officer has been separated from accounting work and limited to only audit. So, students, we see that the Comptroller and Auditor General plays very important role in bringing out the unwise expenditure and excessive expenditure, and he raised the question regarding the legality of any transaction. And not only this, he also suggests some, he provides some suggestions regarding the improvement in the working and all the account activities of these departments. And after 1976, his work has been limited to only the audit functions of the government accounts. Independence of the CAG. The nature of the duties of the Comptroller and Auditor General is such that if he is not kept independent from the executive and political influence, he will not be able to perform his duties honestly and promptly. Hence, the Constitution has protected his independence by the following provisions. First, appointment. The Comptroller and Auditor General is appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister, but he cannot be removed by the President unless his misconduct and incompetence is proved in a resolution by both the houses of Parliament. Students, if we see the nature of work of the Comptroller and Auditor General, it is very essential that he is kept independent from the executive and political influence. So, there are many provisions in the Constitution of India to make this post independent. First of them is appointment. If we see the procedure of appointment, no doubt he is appointed by the President on the recommendations of the Prime Minister, but once he is appointed, he cannot be removed from office unless his incompetence is proved by a resolution in the both houses of the Parliament, and that is also with special majority. Second, salary. The salary of this officer is given from the Consolidated Fund of India. Hence, although the Parliament can debate on his subject, but cannot give its annual vote on it. Apart from this, the salary and conditions of service of the Comptroller and Auditor General cannot be varied to his disadvantage during the term of his service. Student, if we talk about the salary given to this officer, we see that this is given from the Consolidated Fund of the India. That is why it cannot be voted by the Parliament on this subject. Also, the salary and conditions of service of the Comptroller and Auditor General cannot be varied to his disadvantage. Some scholars say that this provision should be made in condition of advantage giving also, because if this condition is not applied, then government can give benefits to this officer which can be detrimental for the independence of the post. Third, no post of profit after retirement. After retirement, the Comptroller and Auditor General cannot hold any office of profit under the union or state governments. This provision serves as an important factor in making the office of the Comptroller and Auditor General impartial and honest. Student, after retirement from this post, the person holding this post cannot join any office of profit under whether the central government or state governments, and you can understand that the fact that he cannot join any office of profit after retiring from this can make a person impartial and honest. Fourth, direct connection with Parliament. the Comptroller and Auditor General has a direct relationship with the Parliament and he is a servant of the Parliament. No minister is answerable for his actions. Because of this provision, the Comptroller and Auditor General is independent from political influence. Student, this is another important provision which makes this post totally independent from the executive, because no minister is answerable or accountable for the functions of the CAG, and due to this post become independent from any political influence. Fifth, full control. The Comptroller and Auditor General holds complete control over all the officers and employees of the accounts department. The conditions of service of these officers are determined by the President in consultation with the Comptroller and Auditor General. The entire administrative expenditure of the office of the CAG is met from the Consolidated Fund of India. Students, another point says that this officer holds full control over all the officers and employees of his office, and expenditure of his office is also met from the Consolidated Fund of India. These provisions make this post independent. Evaluation. The work and responsibility of the Comptroller and Auditor General is very important. Hence, in the Indian Constitution, he has been given the same rights and status as the judges of the Supreme Court. This officer is also criticized on some grounds. According to some critics, the Comptroller and Auditor General often forgets the limits of his powers. Instead of playing the role of a vigilant watchdog, he creates difficulties in the work of administration by objecting to the decisions of public servants. Students, no doubt that the Comptroller and Auditor General plays very important role in financial control over the executive, but the functions of these officers are not free from criticism. For example, according to some critics, this officer sometimes crosses its limit in audit functions, and it objects the minor decision making by the administration, and due to this the administrator hesitate to take important initiative in the administrative field. According to American scholar Paul Appleby, the institution of the Comptroller and Auditor General is a colonial legacy in India, and the office of the CAG should be abolished. In his words, auditors do not know and cannot be expected to know very much about good administration. What an auditors know is auditing, which is not administration. It is a necessary but highly pedestrian function with a narrow perspective and very limited usefulness. In India, the Comptroller and Auditor General remains the main reason for the widespread reluctance among public employees to take decisions and do their work. Students, if we highlight the words of the Paul Appleby, who was invited in India to have a study on administration at that situation after independence, he highly criticized the post of the Comptroller and Auditor General, and he expressed the view that the auditor can only audit the accounts and he has no usefulness in administration. According to him, Comptroller and Auditor General is the main reason behind the reluctance among the public employees to take decisions regarding new initiative. The concern is also raised that audit in India is strictly negative and aggressive in nature. It does not suit the needs of a welfare administration. In most of the cases, audit is done after a number of years. During the court's time, the persons who were actually responsible for the expenditure are transferred, resulting in many complications. Student, it is also said that in a country like India, who is welfare country, the audit functions or the procedures of audit, which are very time taking, and sometimes it hinders the timely taken welfare activities, and which can result in the non productive results of the welfare activities. But despite all these criticisms, the work and importance of the Comptroller and Auditor General cannot be underestimated. He ensures proper utilization of government funds. Although the work of the Comptroller and Auditor General is important, its purpose should not be to look at the administration from a restrictive perspective. The Comptroller and Auditor General should be a watchdog and not a bloodhound. So, student, we can evaluate his functions and say that though this officer is very important for the auditing functions of all the government accounts, but regarding his role, he should play a role of watchdog which protects the unauthorized transactions, but he should not play the part of a bloodhound who tries to find the error in all the transactions and raise objections in minute transaction activities. Conclusion: thus, accounts and audit are two important procedures of sound financial system. Audit is an important instrument of legislative control over the financial functions of executive. The Comptroller and Auditor General is an important officer mentioned in the Indian Constitution for audit of government accounts. He safeguards the public money and ensures proper utilization of public fund. The usefulness of the office of CAG may be enhanced with introduction of reformative measures in this institution. Students, we can conclude by saying that accounts and audit are two important procedures or instruments which realizes the legislative control over executive, and in India for this purpose we have the post of the Comptroller and Auditor General, who plays very important role to ensure that all the public money is utilized in proper way without any unauthorized, irregular or illegal transaction activity. So, there are some need to take reformative actions also, like we may make this institution multi-member institution. Also, we can reduce the time which is taken by this office in audit functions, and we can enhance the usefulness of this office. Thank you.